If you have been around St. Mo's in the last few weeks, you might know already that today is a special day in the life of our 2-year-old church. Today is the very first time in the life of St. Mo's that you can join this church. That's why you'll have an orange-topped card in your seat. Hopefully you can pull that out now. I'll be referring to that for the next few minutes. The main way we communicate in-house here at St. Mo's is through St. Mo's Slack, and so those of you who are on Slack already will have seen a few short videos that I posted there this last week going through what this card means, so you wouldn't be caught by surprise this morning. However, I know that a lot of you aren't on Slack yet, aren't checking that regularly, so I'm going to run through this this morning to help us all understand what this is about. Here's maybe the first question. I think a lot of you are asking, why would I join? Why would I join this church? I've been here for a while. I've been showing up. I've been serving, been part of this thing. Why would I join? And I want to tell you, when you join, you get shorter sermons and midweek children's ministry. Kidding. I would have signed up last week if that were true. When you ask the question that way, like what does this get me? The answer is not a whole lot. If you're already committed, if you're already all in with this church family, joining formally this Sunday doesn't get you a whole lot, but it does get you some things. It means that you are able to vote in our annual general meetings and thus register your voice and help to steer the life of the church as we make major decisions. It also means that you get to help be a part of selecting the leadership of the church, the officers, the elders, deacons, and such for the life of the church. It also means that you are eligible when you have joined the church to be elected into one of those positions of being an elder or a deacon, an officer of the church. So if you would like to contribute to the life of the church, be part of the life of the church at that level, joining formally by filling out this card this morning is the way that you do that. However, there's a much deeper level, I think, on which we might ask this question, sort of a meta level. Why would I become a member? And here's why. It's because there are certain fundamental spiritual, relational realities in our lives that are true and that we enjoy, but which we nonetheless must concretize to make sense of. That was abstract. What do I mean? I mean this. I'm married to Jill. I love Jill. Spiritually, relationally, we are one. But if my kids ask, what does that mean? Or if I'm having a bad day and I need to remember what it means to be married to Jill, I can't point to a wedding ring because mine is on the bottom of the upper yoke in Pennsylvania. It was titanium, don't worry. But we remember our wedding day, the day when we made explicit vows in front of God and in front of each other to be committed to this spiritual reality. Here's another one. If you've ever been to a baptism, in many more formal baptism liturgies, after the minister has baptized the person, dunking them or sprinkling them, they'll splash a little water on the congregation and say, "Remember your baptism." What do they mean? They don't mean, think back to that day when you were 0 months old, or that day several years ago when you got dunked. What they mean is, if you have leaned the weight of your life on Jesus, remember now the fact that you have been rescued by God. The fact that your life has been immersed in the Spirit of God. That you are being shaped into the likeness of Jesus, forgiven of your sins. And it's hard to point to something in your life other than to point back to the day that you were dunked or sprinkled, and so we say, remember your baptism. We concretize the spiritual reality. And in many ways, with church membership, it's the same thing. If you have leaned the weight of your life on Jesus, you are a member of the church. I can't give that to you. You can't sign your way into that. If you've leaned the weight of your life on Jesus, if you have His Spirit in your life, you have more in common with another Christian on the other side of the world who speaks a different language, works a different job, looks different than you do with the identical twin with whom you share DNA. You already belong together, but sometimes, because of the way our minds and our hearts work, because sometimes we rub each other the wrong way and we take advantage of each other and we want to hang out with people who are just like us rather than different than us. We need to concretize the fact that we belong to each other. That's why you become a member. You're making formal the statement that we belong to Christ and we belong to each other as His church. So if you pick up this little card, you'll see that there's a spot for your name and your email and your phone, the date, and you can sign it at the bottom. And I just want to walk through briefly the kind of bullet points on here. These are the things that you are committing to today when you push all in and say, I'm joining, and you fill out this card. The first is that you'll see it says, I've trusted Jesus as my Lord and Savior. This is just a way of saying that you believe the gospel, that the God who made you also entered space-time history as a human being in the person of Jesus Christ, that He died in your place on a cross, that He's offered you forgiveness, that He's been raised to new life, that He offers you that new life, that the Spirit of God is in you as you have trusted Him. And furthermore, it's not just giving intellectual assent to a bunch of propositions. It means that you deliberately cede the authority for the direction of your life to the God who made you and who has given His life for you and who is inviting you to cooperate with Him in the renewal of all things. It means you're saying, He's rescued me, and I'm following Him. Not perfectly. I'm not doing it perfectly. None of you, hope this isn't a surprise, aren't doing it perfectly, but you're committed to following Him. That's a prereq for being a member here. And nobody's going to do an inquisition. You're saying, I have trusted Jesus as my Lord and Savior. In our Constitution, it also says those who join are Christians, and they've received water baptism. So I'd say this morning, if you have leaned the weight of your life on Jesus, want to join St. Mo's, go ahead, but have not been baptized, go ahead, fill this out this morning, turn it in, but let us know that you want to be baptized. Send an email to kenneth@stmos.org, DM him on Slack, grab him after the service. Ken, can you raise your hand? Where are you? There's Pastor Ken. Let him know we have several young adult baptisms coming up soon. We'd love to plan to baptize you if you have trusted Jesus and have not yet been baptized. Here's the first of the bullet points. You're committing to gather regularly for worship. Look, it's 2018. We are a highly mobile culture, and in many ways, that's a great thing. I understand that. We're not trying to cut against that per se. This is what I'm saying. There are many Sundays where you wake up and probably the thing you want most is brunch. And you're like, I can get church later on my own time. I can get a better sermon online. I can get my worship jam on with a little iTunes. I can get church later on and fit it in around my schedule. And if you didn't know that, let me be the first to tell you, you can find better sermons than you're going to get here on a Sunday morning. You can find them. Podcasts, come ask me. I'll point you towards them. This isn't about trying to guard against you guys getting that input and encouragement and shaping and worship in other aspects of your life. This is what we're saying. We're committing to each other. When you're not here, there are people who would have been encouraged and built up and blessed and served by you had you been here, who aren't. So we're not legalistic about this. There's not a percentage of Sundays. There's not a number of weekends. You're just saying, this is my priority. I belong to this family. I'm part of this family. I'm in it not just for what I can get out of it. I'm in it to serve and to build up this family. What's the second bullet point? It says, also, we're committing to serve regularly as we are able. We are a church family, and if you're part of a biological family or an adoptive family, you know that families have chores to do. Very few things you can hire contractors, you outsource, but the vast majority of things you do together. We get the work done together, and it's the same in the church. And there are wonderful ways to be a part of carrying the communal chores of this church. And there are some that will fit your schedule. Look, there are some that are highly relational, that are ways that you can get involved that would help you to build friendships with people here, get connected with other people here. You could be part of the setup team where you do something interactive with other people on a Sunday morning. You could be part of children's ministry where you're co-laboring tightly with somebody else. If your schedule is pinched and you frankly don't have a lot of time but do have an oven and do have a phone, you can serve by baking communion bread. Somebody gives you a mix, gives you instructions. You've got the phone number if you get hung up. You just mix this baby up, put it in the oven, and bring it back on a Sunday morning. There are ways to serve. If you can count, if you can walk around, you can be part of our security team. If you can smile and shake someone's hand and be friendly, you can be part of the greeting team. There's work to be done. And if you are committing this morning, if you're joining, you're saying, I'm going to help carry the collective weight of this church. I'm going to do my bit. So we're committing to serving together. Over the next couple of weeks, most of our major volunteer teams will have trainings this fall, and we will be pointing you to the volunteer team leaders over the next couple of weeks so that you can get connected with them. If you're not already serving in some capacity, you can get connected with them, find out more about that team, and join, and then get trained and equipped to help serve in the life of the church. You're committing to give generously as you can. One of the hallmarks of God's people, particularly from the New Testament onwards, is that as God's Spirit works in us, He mirrors in our hearts His own ridiculous generosity. Some of you remember when we were working through Luke's telling of the life of Jesus last year. Jesus is one day hanging out in the temple courts with his friends, and they're just watching people drop stuff in the trumpet-shaped coffers. And this widow, an elderly woman without much in the way of means, goes up to the coffers and she drops in 2 little coins. Kaplink, kaplink. And presumably she's coming in line behind a bunch of people who have dropped in fat wads of Benjamins that just go, fuh, fuh. And Jesus turns to his followers and he says, she put in more than anyone else. She gave her whole, he says, bios, her whole life, her whole livelihood. She put it all in there. She's all in for Jesus. When I think over the brief life of this 2-year-old church, one of the single greatest moments of discipleship was just under a year ago last fall when we had our Plan to Stay Building Pledge Sunday. And younger people here, college students, older people here who don't have much in the way of income, nonetheless, were a high percentage of those pledging financially to the life of this church, giving generously, even if that generously was $12 a year. That's becoming like Jesus in his generosity. So if you're joining St. Mo's, you are committing financially to the life of this church to give generously as you're able. A great biblical rule of thumb is 10%. If you've got an income, giving 10%. I realize for a lot of people, that's not where you are. That's not going to work right now. Just take a step forward. Take a step towards it. Maybe 10% is easy for you. Take a step forward. But nonetheless, if you're joining this church, you're committing to do your part financially and to grow in your generosity like God. The last part is that you are committing to support the vision, values, and leadership. And look, this is always a little bit ticklish to talk about, because the most damaging leadership usually begins with asking for unilateral statements of loyalty. I'm not doing that this morning. The elders and other pastors of St. Mo's are not asking for your unilateral statements of unthinking loyalty this morning. You are not giving up your independent thought. Here's the way I like to think about it. You know, back when you were a kid and you piled into the minivan to do a road trip for a family vacation, and you know where you're going. The last 3 weeks, we've talked about the things that are valuable to St. Mo's, that we collectively value, and we've talked a little bit about where we're going. It's like we're packing now into the minivan, and we're going to St. Louis. It's going to be a long trip. It'll be fun. It might be tough at times. I'm saying don't get into that minivan and 2 days down the road say, oh, man, I could do with some poutine, and every Christian loves foliage. Let's go to Montreal. Like if you're joining this church, you're joining knowing where we're going. And you're committing not to not try to undermine the direction and life and mission of this church. If you don't want to go to St. Louis, don't get in the van. That's all we're saying. If you disagree with theology of the church, decisions of the church leadership, come talk to us. Talk to me. Talk to the person with whom you have an issue. Talk to one of the elders, somebody you trust. Bring it up. We're not saying we're not having conversation. And hear me clearly. If you see illegal activity that hurts someone in this church, if you see something that hurts kids in this church, tell a leader, call the police. We're not asking you to swear your fealty to the leadership of this church and cover anything up. Is that clear? Are we clear about what we're asking here when we're talking about supporting the vision, values, and leadership? So what does this look like this morning to join? It means at our communion time, you will take this card, and if you want to join this morning, you can take a pen, or as your first act, as a member joined to other people, you can borrow a pen and write your name and fill this card out. And by the way, those bullet points, those aren't tick boxes, those are just bullets, so you don't get to like choose 2 out of the 3. What's gonna happen with these? They'll all get framed. A third of them will go on Sam's fridge. We'll take these, we'll update the database, which has a little checkbox for membership, and that way when it comes to things like voting, when it comes to annual general meetings, we have accurate legal records. And this commitment you're making, I've said it previous weeks, is not for all perpetuity. We are re-upping every year, so you are committing for the next year to be a part of this church. That's how you join. So fill this out. During the communion time, we will have the offering box. One at the back will be on the circular table. We'll have one up here. And as you are making your offerings to the Lord, you can also, during that time while people are up and walking around, you can also put this pledge card in there. Another word, what do you do if you're already a member of another church? Like if you've just moved to Baltimore and from Montreal, get in touch with the leadership at your church in Montreal and say, hey, I've moved. I'm becoming a member of another church. That's courtesy. In many instances, the church where you are a member will be glad to clear you off the rolls because they're paying dues per capita. So just do them that courtesy. If you have been an active part of another church here in Baltimore and you're wanting to join St. Mo's this morning, I would say this to you. Just with God, check your motivations. Is there something that you're trying to leave behind there that is not yet resolved? Because if that is the case, and I'm not suggesting for you any of you that it is, but if that is the case, you're not doing that church yourself or St. Mo's favors by just sweeping it under the rug and moving on. If that is the case, or if you have been an active part of other churches in Baltimore and feel like God's calling you to join St. Mo's, be courteous. Speak to the leaders of that church. Say, hey, here's what's going on. Here's why I'm joining St. Mo's right now. That's what I ask of you as one of those leaders. It just helps. It helps churches to see 360, and it's good for us as we're growing in honesty and authenticity with each other.